everybody, and welcome back to Happiness by Habit. I am so excited to be here today with a VIP guest, Raul Herrera, the writer of Capturing Stank Alpha, a book that has the silver medal award from the Military Writers Society of America. Raul, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, mucho gusto back at you. So happy to have you. Let's start with your journey. We would love to learn about your life, and I see this amazing picture also. If I want to ask about that, and let's start with your journey. Walk us through your life.
Well, I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, November 11, 1946, many years ago. And I went to school for 12 years, at elementary school, Holy Cross High School in San Antonio, Texas. My parents could not afford to send me to college at that time, and so I decided to look for what branch of service, military service, would provide me with. I thought I wanted to be an architect, but I was offered a drafting school in the Navy, and so I signed up for 4 years.
You say drafting?
Drafting.
Drafting. Yeah. Okay.
Drafting school.
Okay.
I thought I wanted to be an architect.
Close enough.
But I wanted to further my education in that field of drafting. And the Navy promised me drafting school. And after boot camp in San Diego, I learned that they advised me that the drafting school was closed, no longer available.
Oh, no.
After I had already volunteered for 4 years, after they promised me. But fortunately, I was able to use an award-winning drawing that I made of a lakeside resort. Pardon me. Of a lakeside resort with the floor plan and elevation and color and everything. I won first place. And so with that, my parents sent me to boot camp. This is rare for somebody to receive mail from the outside during boot camp. But the man in charge of our group, he authorized my parents to send that information. So they sent me the actual big drawing and the 3 letters of recommendation from the teachers at Holy Cross.
I was joking. I'm only joking. I'm not.
I went back to classification. And suddenly they decided that drafting school was available.
Oh, it became available back. Okay.
After I showed them all the credentials. But they also needed a draftsman in the Public Works Department in San Diego, in the Navy base. So they offered me drafting school or 2 years on the job training in San Diego. And I had signed up for 4 years. I said, wow, that's 2 years out of my 4-year hitch. That only leaves me with 2 years in sunny California. And I had an uncle, Uncle Dan Funes, who lives in Los Angeles, not far from San Diego. Greyhound bus trip up there. So I chose 2 years on the job training. As it turned out, 2 years on the job training evolved into maybe just a year and several months because I got surprise orders to combat in Vietnam. So what moral to the story is that you never pass up an education. They offered me drafting school, right? I could have come out of drafting school with a higher rate than I had versus the 2 years in sunny California. It didn't turn out to be 2 years. And all of a sudden I got orders to Vietnam. So never pass up an education.
That is a good one. Write it down. That's interesting. Very interesting. That is what inspired you this book, right?
No.
You know, tell us more.
This man right here is who inspired me to write the book.
Okay.
This is a picture of Bobby down in the park. He was the second in command of our combat post. He's the one who fired a round into the trawler's pilot house. He fired a mortar round in there, forcing this ship to lose control and run aground.
And actually, a publisher's idea.
In Vietnam, I was part of what they call Operation Market Time, and our job with all the different boats that we had was footboat, 50-foot boats, combat boats. And our job was to
I had one scene in
1,200 miles of coastline. So there were different bases all coast of South Vietnam. And our mission was to prevent enemy infiltration of these ships. These were called trawlers, resupply trawlers, and they came from North Vietnam. And they were taking the supplies to the enemy forces in South Vietnam, the ones we were fighting. We were supposed to prevent them from coming in. And on July 15th, we captured this particular enemy ship. It was carrying more than
And it helps you right now.
supplies for the Vietcong. And so, then Harvard, Len, he was the second in command of our swift boat. On the swift boat, we had 6 men. A junior grade officer, then JG and Bergen, and then 5 enlisted men. I was one of the 5 enlisted men. My job was that of a radio radar man. That was my job. This man here, Bobby Carver, as a second in command, he was what they call a boatless mate. His job was to see that the boat was up to par for patrolling the areas. We would go on a 24-hour patrol. Leave in the morning, do our patrol, stop the enemy's fishing boats, check me for their credentials, because the enemy would try to want their troops individually, one by one. Our job was to inspect those junks. I was in Vietnam from April of 67 to May of 1968.
You were very young.
20 years old. I turned 21 in Vietnam.
Wow.
And so what happened, you mentioned how did the story come about.
Yes.
Again, this man here was he was an old salt. And that's a term that the old-timers, old-time sailors, he had, I don't know if you can see them, but he had tattoos on his arms. He had a naked woman here, right there. He had anchors right in here. So he had birds on his chest. Very much a sailor. Very much. Very much. There you go. That's Bobby Don Carver. And so he captured that ship by putting that mortar into that trawler. The enemy, the Viet Cong, they didn't like that we kept 90 tons of rifles, ammunition, mortars, rockets, claymore mines, everything to use against the U.S. force and other friendly forces as well. Kept the goods from that trawler from them, but they could use it in battle against us, right? They didn't like it, so they captured this ship. So they put up what they call a bounty. They said, boat number of that swift boat that captured this trawler was 79. That was our book, CF, and that stands for Patrol Tramp Fast, commonly known as a swift boat. So the Viet Cong said we wouldn't get that 79 boat. And so on December the 7th, December the 6th, 1967, we were doing a psychological war along the My shoreline. And we were broadcasting a language, message to the enemy soldiers to give up their arms, to lay down their arms, to give up some to the friendly side. It was called Chu Hoi. That was the Vietnamese Chu Hoi, give up your arms. Well, we were patrolling along the shoreline, along the My shoreline, and we went up once broadcasting this message. We had no response. We didn't see nobody. There were 3 villages called the Kole Hamlets. So the second time they came up the beach, we were ambushed by 3 boats positions. They started shooting at us from 3 positions ahead of us, middle, and even behind us. So they had us pinned down. And the boat officer on the back of the swift,
They do the artwork, they do the editing,
they control the throttle, they push them forward at the same time that the engine that was driving the boat was the pilot house of the swift boat. He also pushed them down. So both efforts, they slammed the throttles down and it killed the engines. So we were receiving fire and returning fire with machine guns and everything else. But it happened that it took a big machine gun round through his eye. And it was killed. It was a big loss, big loss. My first chapter is called Spirit. It takes place on December the 7th.
That's a different story.
On December the 6th, we went back to base. His body was taken aboard a destroyer, and he was lifted to the base in Chu Lai, basically where I the second night after
I started
off
off
the bed. The first time we went, of course, literally drank ourselves, traumatized.
I can only imagine. Raul, where can they find this book? It's
available through my website, skunkalpha.com. And by the way, Skunk Alpha, that's code name So everything relative to my story in my book.
Not many.
Okay, so they will get an Aurora
Yes.
copy. Boy, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
To have been
Very
shared.
interesting, and thank you for telling us about what we've done.